Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke. I'm welcoming you back again. Thank you so much for taking the time to stop by. You know, many of you have been listening to me for a long time. You know, some people, I was actually told the other day that they grew up in the kitchen with their grandmother with me on the radio 40 years ago. So that was a little frightening because I had to kind of accept my age at that point in time. But you know what? Things have changed. The new platform is a podcast. I think it's better. It allows people the versatility to be able to sign in and listen when they want to. And I'm bringing you some of the amazing best minds in the natural products industry. My guest today, Bill Chioffi, is with us. Hey, Bill.
Hey, how's it going, Jeff?
It's going wonderful. Thank you for being here today. Always a pleasure. If you're tuning in and you have not had the pleasure to hear Bill before, I'm going to read you a bio and we're going to deep dive today. And we are going to deep dive into lion's mane today. And I think you're going to get an amazing understanding of this wonderful, beautiful, and effective functional mushroom. Bill is an herbalist and has worked in the natural products community since 1994 in manufacturing, global sourcing, supply chain, education, quality analysis, research, and the sale of dietary supplements and ingredients. He has experience within the natural products retail, ingredient manufacturing, and food and beverage sectors. He is currently Chief Operating Officer for Nammex and has worked with Gaia Herbs, the Ric Scalzo Institute for Botanical Research at Sonoran University of Health Science, and an independent business owner. Now, in addition to his work with Nammex, Bill has a long-standing member and serves on the board of directors for United Plant Savers and is a representative of Nammex to the American Herbal Products Association Board of Directors, representative to the United States Products Association, and member of the Association of Official Analytical Chemists. Bill lives in Asheville, North Carolina with his family and spends as much time outdoors as possible. He likes to fish, fly fish, hike, garden, and mushroom forage around the mountains of North Carolina and beyond. You know, some of these bios, Lord, you guys, exhausting.
Oh, I think it needs to be run through Chat GPT and condensed a little bit, to tell you the truth.
And
But
I did.
thank you for the intro.
Of course. And, you know, sometimes I cut them back and it's just, some people have just done so many wonderful things, you know, and I like to call out all their hard work.
Yeah, no, thank you for the background and the bio. And I'm actually not in North Carolina right now. I'm in Roberts Creek, British Columbia, which is where Nammex is located on the Sunshine Coast. Short hour boat ride from West Vancouver to get to where we are. So I'm spending some time here in the labs and with our sales team. And, you know, as part of my work as COO at Nammex, I was commuting regularly to come out and work with the team. So I'll be here till May, and
Nice.
Came out after Expo West, came out just before Expo West, actually. And so it's a beautiful time to be on the coast in the spring. And I think the fall mushroom flushes around here are a little bit more varied than in the spring. But yeah, I'm excited to be here and working with the team and talking with you about lion's mane today.
You know, it's funny, a funny story. When I was traveling during the pandemic, I was in Arizona and there was a small little vegan vegetarian restaurant outside the hotel and, you know, nothing was open, you know, but they were. And I knocked on the door and I said, "Are you open?" And they were like, "Yes, please come in." So I went in and I sat down and she brought me this little bowl of these little white cubes. And it looked like they were sauteed in onions and garlic and stuff. And I said, "What is this?" And she goes, "Eat, you tell me." I went, all right. So I started eating it. And to me, it tasted like lobster. And I'm eating it and I'm like, "You're serving seafood?" She goes, "No, it's lion's mane." And I was like, "No way." And she said, "Yeah." And I became hooked on it as a food source at that point. But I had been using it as a supplement for a long time. And it was just kind of interesting because I never would have associated the flavor of it like that.
Yeah, it's definitely has a pop of umami, which is
Hmm.
a term and a flavor people are becoming more familiar with. And yeah, it also has an interesting texture because it is quite fleshy,
Hmm.
and it can even shred a little bit. Like I've seen people make faux crab cakes from
Ah.
fresh lion's mane recipes. So, and you're hitting on a topic that kind of leads me to think about how we often get asked at Nammex the best use. Of course, people want to know dosing information, and we're delivering a dietary ingredient. We don't offer detailed dosing information, but we can refer back to, again, what have people consumed for the mushroom over time. And mostly when you consume mushrooms, they're cooked, right? So your mushrooms were sauteed with something and cooked in a pan and delivered to you. In other forms, they may be dried and then reintroduced into a soup, like a morel mushroom, rehydrated, and but they were cooked somehow. And this can be traced back to the earliest uses of mushrooms in traditional Chinese medicine of the decoction, where a dried mushroom would be um, dictated to be boiled in water for a certain period of time, and then the boiled water part that becomes quite bitter. And you've had TCM formulas before where you've gotten herbs, multiple ones of them that you decoct. So you're going to boil them in water for a period of time and use that as opposed to an infusion, which would be a tea, where you would just infuse water over the leaves or structure. And part of that process is, well, it's the traditional knowledge of the preparers of these medicines who knew why it was important to treat certain substances in certain ways when you deliver them as a medicine as opposed to a food. But also with mushrooms, the cooking part releases and breaks down the chitinous cell walls that hold the beta glucans and some other constituents that are trapped within that make mushrooms, let's say, a little bit more difficult to digest. So, in the process of a lion's mane mushroom, like you're talking about getting it served in a restaurant, typically, yeah, that's how, like, in the US specialty market, which is comprised mostly of shiitake mushrooms, would be fresh. Um, those are all calculated on the USDA's website as fresh, 100 grams of fresh mushrooms. 100 grams of fresh mushrooms will fit in your hand. Um, and if you consider most mushrooms are 90% water or so, when you dry that down, now you got 9 grams, 90 grams of dried material. So it's really the matter of like when you're serving it as a dietary ingredient. Now our products are in a powdered form that are going to be added to a smoothie blend or some other type of capsule, tablet, bars, what have you. Um, you have this market price of quite expensive, right? Like you can buy shiitakes and lion's mane in the store now, but they might be $10.99 to $13 a pound fresh. You know, you multiply that by a factor of 9 to get the dry weight cost, and you start to see where based on US cultivation and things, these prices would be astronomical to grow here, which is why are mushrooms coming from a source like China, where they've been growing these for quite some time, and they're growing them as both foods and for use in dietary supplements at scale, meaning you need tons of this at the same consistency and quality time after time. I think that's where Nammex really excels in being able to offer that type of ingredient, but with the analytical standards and quality standards that meet the National Organic Program standards, and also meet a standard of you could call it corporate social responsibility or fair trade, but the fact that the family and the ownership of the business has been doing business for close to 40 years with the same groups of people and families in China, and visiting them for that long a period of time. Visits including both friendly visits, business visits to audit facilities and farms. That type of integrity is hard to duplicate in a new and emerging market that we have for mushrooms.
Well, there's a lot of history and a lot of tradition that's kind of installed into that, and that's priceless, so that they're still working with the same groups and the same families is a very good positive note for Nammex as well. I had asked Ric Scalzo, I said, we're using Nammex mushrooms in the products that you're doing from Kokora. Why did you choose that group? And he said, first of all, his relationship with you, and of course with Jeff and Sky as well. But also we talked about the history of, the water extraction methods, the quality of the soil. Rick is very tuned into soil all the way around in his life. And, he talked about the laws of nature, and he goes, there's just parts of the world where things just grow differently, and he attributes that to the areas that you use there, as the earth giving back to these amazing mushrooms that you're growing there, and being able to stay consistent and clean and producing products of quality and integrity. So those are things that are important to him, me as well. But I think that's why he has kind of decided to go your way, and I respect that fully.
Yeah, I think, Rick and I have for a very long time had conversations about the topic of geoauthenticity. And that ties into what he was describing to you. It's not a new concept at all. There's many good companies. Traditional Medicinals has pioneered some thought on geoauthenticity. And so you can get astragalus from China, and you can get astragalus from other places in the world now where it's grown. And there is something to the fact that a lot of the astragalus has been coming from the Mongolian deserts for quite some time. Maybe that plant has made special adaptations to that type of soil. We saw it with maca, right? When maca was being exported from China and from Peru, with live roots going to parts of China for cultivation, very much outside of the regulated system, let's say, and back in 2014. And yes, maca will grow in those areas, but is it geoauthentic material now? It's not Peruvian maca. Maca is listed as an item of cultural significance in Peru. So it's treasured and protected under export laws. And so I think, these are some things to really consider. And it's also, the history there is deep. 800 years ago, this is where shiitake mushrooms were first grown on logs from inoculation, intentionally. And so it's not to say these things didn't happen before. This is the first recorded history. And coming from an area very close to where Nammex's production site is in Zhejiang, Qingyun County. And if you look this up, and Jeff, I'll provide you with the references to this. I think it's a UNESCO World Heritage Cultural Significance site in the mountains of Qingyun County. It's quite well known because of its direct connection to mushroom cultivation and the specific types of farmers who were growing mushrooms with their own systems related to soil, but more related to forest husbandry and let's say early agroforestry, where you had trees and you had mushrooms that were dependent. Lion's mane, for instance, back to our topic, that grows on hardwood tree species across many different regions. So it's really in nature growing and has a symbiotic relationship with, let's say, the tree species and any of the decaying matter that might be from them. But if you saw it in the wild, it would be on a decaying log, dead, or a tree. Could be a live tree even still. And so you have to think about that in your, let's say, cultivation of a mushroom. So is it geo-authentic for a culture to be introduced to something like oats or rice and then served, even if it might grow some mushroom and you serve a full spectrum type product, which is that geo-authentic? No, absolutely. But like, it's not, these are the types of questions that go through my mind because we do have different forms of things that are being sold as mushrooms now. And that's nothing new. Spores have been reishi spores, like the Ganoderma lingua that is behind me. They grow specific types of lingua to produce more spores, like and less, depending on whether they're going to use the mushroom part or they're using the spores as the primary medicine. And I think Ganoderma spores are more popular in China for use among their population than the mushroom part. So it's interesting to see how the species start to become more popularized, and it makes sense with lion's mane because it checks off a lot of boxes for things that our aging population is dealing with: cognitive decline, dementia, other things that could be either stress or age related. And, the understanding of the chemistry of lion's mane is advancing at the same time. So it's always an interesting conversation because it'll always come back to it's the mushroom itself that is the medicine, not the sum of any of its parts, not the haricinones, which are really predominant in the mushroom, the cute looking fuzzball type things that you see pictured when they're fresh. And the arenacenes, which are rich in the mycelium or the vegetative body that would be in nature, it would be inside the tree, wood, embedded in all that wood. The way it's produced in China commercially, it's produced in liquid bioreactors through liquid fermentation. And the mycelia can be enriched to produce more of the arenacenes through the nutrient broth that the culture is added to. And then you have the same type of culture that can be added to a solid grain that's been sterilized, and then it will start to consume the grain to a certain degree, and then that is served as mushroom. And the arenacenes, though, that have a lot of research, both in vitro and animal studies, for supporting nerve growth factor. And so I think that when we, again, and you've been through this before with other things, when you start to do animal study and in vitro translations from one isolated constituent and apply too much credence to that one part of what makes the mushroom or substance work, you get in trouble. It is an appropriate marker, though, to say that you would not find much arenosine A in a mushroom. You'd find a lot of haricinones in the mushroom, and those have also been correlated to nerve growth factor. And they've also been correlated to some of the subjective responses in clinical trials where you administer a substance and then after minimum of 4 to 6 weeks, you would start to ask the respondents questions related to standardized tests like the Hamilton Depression or some of the other ratings that a subject could give you based on their mood or any of those other conditions. So one of the most interesting lion's mane studies that I've seen administered cookies as the dose form. So they put 2 grams of lion's mane mushroom powder per cookie, and they were to eat those cookies or a placebo cookie, and then it was measuring a specific population for mood-related issues. And we need more of those types of studies. Human clinical trials are always interesting to validate things, but leading into tradition, if you were to look at how TCM would use that mushroom based on its energetics and so forth, it would be basically, without getting into a dissertation on it, would be to improve digestion or tonify digestion. Now, the gut-brain axis starts to come to mind about how it might work. If we're allowed to theorize here on the podcast and we're not being held down to, references and such, I'd say, yeah, there is a huge, with all of the mushrooms, there is a gut-brain axis connection to what's happening because they're comprised of a lot of insoluble fiber and things that are possibly, they could be referred to as slow carbs, or things that assist and have often prebiotic type activity in the gut, probiotic and prebiotic. So, yeah, I think go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting because the things that you're pointing out to with lion's mane, a lot of the things that we read, gastrointestinal health, immune, mood fluctuation, occasional anxiety, cognitive health, things like that, their lion's mane is definitely connected to in the mindset of both chemists, scientists, and the public. It seems like, and I just wonder, has it gained more popularity over the last, let's say, decade because of an aging population?
That's good. I mean, probably, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think when I think of what's been popular and used in dietary supplements for years, it was really only just reishi. And then came a couple of other species, but I think, yeah, I think that's part of it. I think also that we're in this age where we're in a overload of information and processing that information, and have more access to more digital means. So you're on your computer and then you're on your phone. And I really honestly do think our brains are taxed more with that type of activity than they ever have. So is lion's mane the answer? Maybe it's part of it, but also, as you know, always comes back to all those other lifestyle things that are about balance and how much time are you spending in nature if you're fortunate enough to have access to the outside world to enjoy on a regular basis. So yeah, I think that but lion's mane as well, like what's encouraging about much of what's happening with mushrooms is that you have to remember they're safe, they've been eaten as foods. That's how we'd like to see people consume these is, thank goodness there's more fresh mushrooms in the grocery stores that you can go get oyster mushrooms now. And, that's part of the educational process with the consumer here in the West as well, because it's well known that we are one of the lowest consumers of mushrooms in terms of our population. And the Chinese will eat more mushrooms in a week than we'll eat all year as a person. Probably more in a day, I would say, even than most people, because a lot of people just don't like the taste, which is where a supplement can come in a capsule form or in some other delicious mixture that mixes it with cocoa or other things, So coffee is huge now. So yeah, I think lion's mane fits that, but I also think that there's other activities in all of these mushrooms, and let's be careful not to start to pigeonhole them too much, like we do with botanicals, where
which we do.
yeah, turmeric becomes only for inflammation or only for joint pain when it's a bitter, really, at the end of the day, and it does help tonify digestion. So in fact, the Swedish bitters formula, one of the keys to that original formula, as you know, if you ever spilled any of it, was the concentrated turmeric that was in it. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's interesting. I think if you asked Jeff, the founder of Nammex, you ever think like maybe you can ask him next time on the podcast, did you ever think lion's mane would blow up to be what it is now? Because it certainly drives a majority of of our sales and focus and attention and so I don't know. I think yes, we're declining in cognition, and there's also a lack of safe and effective therapeutics that are prescription therapeutics in that category as well. So it also ticks off that box.
Well, for me, it's been an interest. I've been using lion's mane for a long time, as I have things like phosphatidylserine and all those other kind of nutrients, because I come from an Alzheimer's family, and quite saturated throughout the family on both sides of the bloodlines. And, my world is all about thinking, learning, and talking. And it's scary. And so am I saying that I'm taking these because I know I'm going to be able to keep things from happening? No. But am I taking things to support my body, to give it the tools that it may need to be able to make a difference as I get older? Because I am older, and the thing about it is we have to realize that you can't keep writing checks on an account that has no money. You have to start putting some deposits back in. And I try to do that in every sector that I feel that I need to focus on. And this is one that I find I kind of hold, close to my heart, because it's very scary, as I've seen so many people that have gone through, both the dementia and the Alzheimer's stage. And it's very disheartening and very scary. And for me, it's just, if there's something that's getting some good feedback after I do my research, chances are it's going to be part of the regimen.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And I do my puzzles, and I'm a language learner, and I've found these are also things that help keep the mind sharp. And so, yeah, the fact that also the need for this driven by consumers also drives us as manufacturers of ingredients to get better at what we do. So it's a wonderful virtuous loop.
I have a question for you. If you've ever seen lion's mane, you see those big white fluffy clouds that they kind of are. Weird question, but you need to satisfy my curiosity, if you will. If it was growing wild in nature, and will it just continue to grow, or does it get to a point when it just dies and starts over if it's not being cultivated? I've always wondered how big it can get.
The mushroom, the fruiting body or the mushroom, if it was erinaceous, the Hericium erinaceus, the ones that you would see, ones I've seen in North Carolina are probably Hericium americanum. And, some of the lion's manes have really long, like, fingers coming out of them. And so I think how long will it last? Well, any of those fresh mushrooms has a shelf life for it to produce its spores. It's really the end production stage where it's going to produce spores. And then after the spores are produced and released and it's performed its function, something might come along and eat it and then spread more of the spores through its scat. But typically I think, those are like, you got like maybe a month it would depend. In a cultivated condition, it would continue to flush and you'd pick mushrooms fresh when they flush. But like if you left one on there, maybe it would last a month to two before it started to just kind of rot and decay and become part of the earth again. So in cultivation, you've got these, you can see behind me, like the reishi that are there. Those are in bags that are filled with sawdust, wood dust that's in there, inoculated with the reishi, and then one mushroom will grow up out of the top of that. The lion's mane grow in a similar way, but multiple mushrooms will grow out of one log. And those are picked as soon as they're sort of mature, and they'll continue to mature through 3 to 4 flushes, right? So that's another thing to consider, is that all mushrooms are picked by hand. So most of the mushrooms you've ever eaten, even white button mushrooms, are someone's picking it by hand. And they're starting to mechanize some processes, but they flush at different times, and they'll continue to flush until the mycelium has no longer much substrate left to consume, and it's towards the end of its life cycle. So yeah, it's quite interesting and a little bit different than typical soil cultivation, right? Where it's a little similar, like apples will form on a tree and they'll stay nice and ripe on there. And then eventually, how long does that take for the apple to rot? I don't know. Or what are the conditions like, So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The safety factor is something that I know you stressed already, and I think we need to remind people of the safety factor of functional mushrooms. And I think that's important, because sometimes when there's an unknown, and people are just learning about something, they go right to, is it toxic? Because they heard something about a mushroom or something over their lifetime, and those are of course different kinds of mushrooms. And there are poisonous mushrooms. Let's just face it, there are. But for the most part, these mushrooms that we're talking about are very relatively safe.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is like I think it's a really important topic because, again, shiitake, lion's mane, maitake, these have all been eaten as foods. They're in the diet, and they have been consumed for quite some time. Rolls it up to, if we're talking about the U.S. dietary supplements market, like a lot of our regulations are in flux right now, and the whole GRAS process, self-affirmed process for generally recognized as safe, that could change and be done away with. Not to say that there wouldn't be any regulations in place, but everyone has been operating for the food category of these things based on those regulations. So so there's a little bit of uncertainty about that. But for me, like, mushrooms, again, they've been eaten for quite some time, and when you do look at, we've done GRAS self-affirmations on our concentrates, and that does go into human use, and it does reference how much of these mushrooms in a dried format or fresh format has any population ever eaten. And so that's kind of where you'd make your considerations on safety. Yeah. And the fact that it's also anything that's sold in the produce aisle that's also over in your supplement aisle, you just think about the changes that had to occur from what might happen between that produce aisle and going over into the bottle, whatever it is, even if it's kale, you don't like to eat kale, but you want a kale supplement.
That's funny, but that's so really true, though.
It's true.
You know,
Yeah.
especially with me and kale, definitely.
Oh, did I
Uh,
hit one? Did I hit a
oh,
nerve?
I can't eat it. I
Yeah.
wish I could. It just doesn't go down.
You just have to try Rick's massaged kale salad sometime. I can't believe he hasn't made it for you.
Yeah, that's and it's been mentioned, so I
Yeah.
need to call him on that.
Yeah.
So, do different people respond differently to lion's mane? I mean, do younger people get benefits from it as well as people that are older? I mean, is it something that the body utilizes more at an older age, or is it something that we can get benefits in many areas through an entire lifetime?
I don't think it discriminates. I think the benefits are there across population. And again, the important thing to remember is like, all right, if you want to trace it back to something in literature, that they're all longitudinal studies, meaning you wouldn't even look for results before 4 weeks time, and even that might be the first check in on something.
Mhm.
So when you're talking about tonifying a system or adapting, that happens over a period of time usually. So I think that's where daily incorporation of these mushrooms into your foods and with a supplement is probably the best. That's the best way to go for any of them, and certainly true of lion's mane. Um, I'm reading some interesting things about synergistic combinations of lion's mane with other things that may have more of an immediate benefit. And um, so it's not to say that there may not be a preparation at some point that does have an immediate impact, or something like you can feel in one dose of kava, you're feeling
Yeah.
the effects. Um, but these are really concentrated foods in the form of mushrooms that were meant to consume over a period of time. Um, food studies, and actually studies, the Enhane study of mushroom consumption, kind of proving that it did have a positive impact on overall longevity and lifespan in the population that ate it. That was done on fresh mushroom consumption, or mushrooms that were cooked and eaten in the diet. So yeah, very encouraging that the research looks like could get eventually even more support. So
The reason I'd asked the question is I was in a conversation the other day, and the people that I was talking with said, "Well, lion's mane is only for old people." And I said, "No." And that's where that question came from, because I'm going to make
mhm.
them listen to this. And
Yeah, I know plenty of young folks that are using lion's mane, and
me
especially
too.
like if you're you have an online job, let's say, or you're multitasking throughout the day.
Yep.
It's yeah, it's definitely beneficial to take it daily, though, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, I think I've been on it now for probably a little over 10 years, and it's just become a staple. And I've bopped around and tried different things and different within the category. And, so I'm really looking forward to trying some of these new formulations that Rick is putting together, and incorporating them in, because, it's something that it's a critical part of my regimen, and many people that I work with in the industry, it's a critical part of theirs as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, mushrooms are they're getting to be a lot more. It's so funny. Other places in the world for so long, and here we're just opening the door and saying, "Yeah, I think I might take some of those things." And I'm just like, Lord, because I did radio shows for 10 years on functional mushrooms, and it just was not connecting. And now today it's amazing. So something has clicked, or the mindsets have changed, or the visibility has changed.
Yeah, totally. And there's more ways to get information than ever, and things trickle. Not, health trends. I think at least in the U.S. market used to start out west in California, and then trickle towards the east. And that started to change where, well, not so much anymore. It's like it's happening all over, and simultaneously. So, yeah, I'm excited about it. I love seeing the different research on building materials that are made from certain types of mycelium that is really interesting. Bioremediation using types of fungal strains, um, and then all of the different interest in universities and nutritionists, renewed interest in mushrooms, because now it's not just about caloric value. Nutritionists realize the value of insoluble fiber, soluble fiber. For years, mushrooms didn't get much credence because they were a low calorie food.
True.
But they do have very important benefits in terms of the beta glucans that are delivered, the ergothioneine, which again, so lion's mane has quite good amounts of ergothioneine. And we're not really talking about how that relates to longevity. We're talking about the haricinones and other things. So it goes back to considering the totality of what you have, and if you've been able to match the characteristics as closely as that substance was in nature to what you're delivering to your client or consumer, what have you.
I love it. For the first a couple of years ago, I was in Washington, and it was morel season.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine took me out on a morel hunt. And we went out, and he just knew exactly where to go, because it was a haul. And I've eaten mushrooms throughout my whole life, but I'd never eaten morels. And they were definitely something to enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the favorites around here are the chanterelles. That's kind of so good, so flavorful. And yeah, I've gotten into a little bit of cultivation myself with mushrooms, both trying it on some log cultivation and different methods, and those are back in Asheville right now. So I'll have to see what the status is there. But yeah, it's wonderful being on the show, and this is, I mean, it's the most popular mushroom by far right now, right? Lion's mane. And you're hitting on some good points. Is that it's not just for the aging population. It can be beneficial for more than just cognition, and it's just nice to have that variety to add in. And you can also find it in the grocery store now too. So you could find recipes to be able to cook with it, and so very good show you have here, Jeff.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to love having you on so we can, talk about the different mushrooms one at a time, and give people kind of like a field guide, if you will, and, so they get a full understanding, because that's the whole idea today. It's sometimes a little bit of information can get you in a lot of trouble, and sometimes a little bit more information might provide a little clarity. But I do thank you for taking time out of your day. Would you mind leaving everybody with a thought of the day?
I forgot you asked about the thought of the day.
Whatever comes to mind first.
I don't know. I won't give any kind of thought other than we are in a time where it's sort of a fire hose of information being flooded at us, especially if you're involved in the world of dietary supplements. And yet things continue, right? Like we're still out there doing our jobs. Things are being sold. And that will continue for sure. So, think of like, actually is something that Rick has mentioned before about adaptogens, and specifically, I think he talks about Tulsi, holy basil, keeping you in the eye of the hurricane. So there's all this chaos swirling around you, And the real trick is to remain at the center where it's quite calm in the middle of that vortex. And how do you do that? That's the trick. But there is a way, and it's all about, again, just balance. Yeah.
See, you had a great thought for the day. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. I hope everybody enjoyed the show today. Make sure to go to my webpage, drjeffreyburke.com. Remember, when you get there, tap on the Honest Health logo. It'll take you to Spotify, where you can listen to the audio version. And you can also tap on the YouTube logo and watch the interview as well. But I thank you all for taking the time. My thanks to Bill for being here today. And you guys have a wonderful day. Remember, do something for yourself just because. Have a great day. God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.